Hello, it is Mike Levin. It is the Mike Levin SEO in the NYC. 8 a.m. I'm on my way to the city. I am once again an NYC SEO. A tool. Such is life. You know, one of the greatest beatings of the system in this day and age is to be able to draw a New York salary and to not have New York living expenses. I called that off, but I am back in. A series of events, a series of incidents have convinced me that I have to be much closer than I was. It's being spun one way, but it's actually another way. And there are consolation prizes, and one must focus on the consolation prizes to these sorts of situations. Our greatest addiction is to talk about our problems, so why not talk about the love-worthy things? And I'm not just talking about sour grapes, silver linings, but using those words certainly predisposes it that way, doesn't it? When you use words ahead of talking about something, that is prejudicial language. It plants the idea in your head so that all things that follow are actually colored by that. So, am I just doing sour grapes? Am I just looking for silver lines? Or are there truly love-worthy things that await me back in the NYC? So I went to the Pride Parade, and I have to admit that the journey into Manhattan was both a blast from the past and a fairly pleasurable experience. Lockdown has been good for New York City. I know that all that hits the news is about the crime, but honestly, for someone who doesn't like the crowds so much, to basically have the subway system to yourself on a Sunday morning, on the Sunday morning of Pride, oh my God, it was a bizarre experience. At first I thought that all the news stories about millions of people showing up for this first time it was on since 2019 must have been complete exaggeration. As the day went on, people filled in, so they aren't coming from the South Ferry the way I was. I was on one of the less traversed routes quite early in the morning. And using the power of the car, I know how to navigate Manhattan by not bringing the car into Manhattan, and where you can park it so that you can get in and out of the city pretty quick and easy, and you can park without paying. So there's things that have come with being a New Yorker for 15 years, right? So it was 15 years in New York, and then 2 years out in the Poconos here, right? So lockdown occurred. I go for more power for the dollar. For the same price I'm paying for a cramped little studio, I get a whole house, a recently refurbished house. I got the benefit of moving in to a little bed and breakfast style cottage place that was recently refurbished without lockdown in mind. They didn't know that was coming, so nobody knew how bad it was going to be either. Around June, right? It's March, April was a tricky month in 2020. May started to be a little panicky for people, and by the time June came around, it was hitting the fan. But my lease was up at this place I was living. That was yet another. I was there for 2 years. So in my 15 years in Manhattan, 13 years of them, well, of my 15 years in New York City, 13 of them were in Manhattan. And I lived at several places in Manhattan. It was a journey from about where you saw me yesterday, for anyone who saw my short, at 21st and 5th Avenue. I lived not far from that, so pretty far down south in Manhattan. That's not quite as far south as, say, Greenwich Village or Wall Street or anything like that. But just above that, you start to get to what they call Midtown. I don't know why they call it Midtown, because it goes up to the 218 block. It's because all the action is centered where all the Dutch settlements were back in the days of yore. So Manhattan, interesting stuff, is compressed near the bottom. So by the time you get to 21st Street, they start to call it Midtown. And then 34th Street, 42nd Street, some famous streets there, really is Midtown proper. And then there's the Broadway, area up when you get to like 50th Street. And then popular Manhattan is really over. Above 50th Street, you get to 56th Street and Central Park and the Apple Store and F.A.O. Schwartz and stuff like that. And then that's about it. The Brave would venture up to Harlem at 125th Street. But during the time of my living in New York, I went from 16th Street, right? I lived beneath 21st, where I was hanging out watching the parade yesterday. So I moved from 16th Street up to 103rd Street or something, and then up to 215th Street. So I took a few steps hopping up north in Manhattan. Right? I traveled north in Manhattan until I was at the tippy top upstate Manhattan, they call it. And then I took an actual cottage in the Catskills. So I lived in upstate Manhattan, and then I had a mountain cottage in upstate New York, not very far upstate. They call it the Shawangunk Ridge. It's not the Catskills proper yet, but I had a bunk in the gunks. Those were the days. And I was really on my way to a delightful little life by a lot of the standard measures people use, right? People like to keep their little scorecards. And if you want to have insight now it's to my mind into these types of things, and hopefully it's not sour grapes, hopefully I'm actually zeroing in on a better way of living, is once again at the beginning of Hitchhiker's Guide. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, I forget what it is, but you know, that 4-book trilogy opens up talking about how most of the Earth's woes come from imaginary things that once represented little pieces of paper that moved around, trading little pieces of paper that represented things. This was even before digital, so they were talking about the little pieces of paper, but these days it's just bits in different accounts that verify each other. Enough different systems say that you have such and such, and so you have it. And you can transfer it around, and you can have goods sent to you from Amazon, like materializing things out of thin air from out of thin air resources. We really do live in the age of magic, ladies and gentlemen. This is magic. The ability to have money that is not money, and to use that money to materialize things that didn't exist a few months ago, but are created because statistical algorithms tell the Amazons that these things need to start to be manufactured according to the logistics curves. So, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying that this is the way it is. And the fact that this money doesn't come easily to people is part of the problem. They have to follow these strange paths that are brainwashed into them, saying, work hard all your life, and save your money, and don't pay rent, pay mortgage, so that you're building up assets. So you can have more imaginary money, because you don't really own that house or that property. The government can take it away from you if you don't pay taxes. It's all just part of that protection racket, that, the aforementioned protection racket. I believe it was in the last video. And it's all based on, the British, parcel of land system, hierarchies and royalty. And, this is why Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is such a deeply channeling book. It comments on the types of characters you encounter They're nonsense motivations. They're hereditary motivations. They don't know why they're doing what the heck they're doing. There's the royal class yelling, off with their heads, off with their heads. And not everyone takes them seriously because they're kind of like inbred clowns, right? They are so full of themselves, and the ones with the real power don't always agree with the off with their heads statement, so it becomes empty threats. The Red King, the monarch who has the real power, is sleeping and imagining worlds that might be. Virtual reality is in, that might be Through the Looking Glass, the second book. The Sleeping Red King is a thing, as is quantum mechanics with the knitting sheep transitions. And there is a whole lot of British-style channeling and commentary in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. One ought to read it and read it again and read it again. Both books. It's not a big commitment. And every time, at different phases of your life, you'll get something different out of it as well. One of the things I've gotten out of it over the years is that you bring with you your internal assets. You're always in Wonderland, and you're always having abrupt transitions between places and things, and encountering odd characters, and having to deal with little vignettes of experiences. There is not a particular compelling story arc in life. Not unless you make it, you bring it with you. And Alice doesn't. Alice is just having sort of a live-in-the-moment experience, learning. I don't know how much of a dynamic character she is, but she starts to learn that whenever she eats or drinks something, she changes size. And that's one of her big learnings, that she has power in deciding what she consumes and takes into her body, because everything in Wonderland that you take into your body has some effect. Now, I had the remains of one of the great gifts I made for myself, my blended drink that you saw a few videos back, before I left on this drive. This is a drive on a rainy Monday morning on one of the most delightful and easy drives, highway driving experiences I've ever had. You can see the foliage, the beautiful foliage, as the senator from Birdcage would say, as we drive through I-80. And I was able to compare this, my hour-and-a-half drive back and forth between where my kid lives and where I live. This hour-and-a-half drive is a beautiful, uninterrupted, for the most part, spiritual, relaxing drive. It's been good for me. Now, and that's the Poconos, right? So there's two mountain ranges I talk about a lot. Neither of them are the big mountain ranges. The Poconos are kind of the foothills of the Adirondacks, a much more famous mountain range down here in the, well, I guess more in the south and west of Pennsylvania, where you start to get into Virginia and some of these other states that are more mountainous. And they have the famous Adirondacks. And the Poconos Mountains are kind of like the foothills of the Adirondacks, and I lived in the Poconos for a few years. And then the other place where I had a cottage, I didn't really live there so much as summered there, was in the Catskills, but really the Shawangunk Ridge, which is the foothills of the more famous Catskills. The Catskills where the Jews used to go to summer and vacation before air flight became cheap and they all went to Florida. Air flight and air conditioning. Airplanes and air conditioning detoured all the Jews to Florida from the Catskills, and that basically killed the Catskills. And they had these huge, wonderful vacation resorts where big talent, you know, it would be, you know, how do names elude me, but they were the big famous old vaudevillian Jewish comedians. Buddy Hackett grew up there. In fact, Buddy Hackett grew up in the Shawangunk Ridge. I was briefly a member of the synagogue that the Hackett family belonged to, and that was really interesting. So there's a lot of, so mountains. The mountains draw me. I like mountain living, and I like getting power for the dollar. Now, ironically, this beautiful little trip out I-80 that I did, all the New Yorkers got clued onto that as well, and all the property that you can buy back in East Stroudsburg now has been driven up to ridiculous prices. It's been voted as the worst place to buy property in the United States, right? All the New Yorkers, all the Manhattanites, all the people who were looking for the cure, just like I was, followed this same beautiful drive. It's not hard to discover. You look at a map, you go, how do you go somewhere that's likely to have beautiful places, cultural opportunities too, because it's a resort town. It's famous for the honeymooning, right? The Poconos is famous for honeymoon resorts and skiing. So it's a resort town. And it's close to everything, It's still close to New York City. It's close to Philadelphia. It's close to lots of shopping areas, right? It's the middle of a shopping mecca. You're not far from the Amish in Lancaster, and a lot of really interesting and diverse cultural experiences. So it's a good place to be. There's good school districts. It's a good place to grow up. It was my plan B. In case New York went to hell in a handbasket from like a zombie apocalypse, in case one of the variants was nasty. So we're 2 years past that now, and none of the variants were all that nasty. And the miracles, right? I talk about the miracles of our time. You focus on the good. There's so much paranoia, so many people who want to dredge up bad aspects of it, but to be able to manufacture vaccines from scratch that work is a miracle. These people should be celebrated as heroes. The mRNA stuff, Moderna, we live in the future, ladies and gentlemen. We may not have flying cars, but we have pandemic vaccines like ordering it off of Amazon that never existed before. Here's how the virus works. Here's how mechanically we can fight it. Those little corona things that, were like the little hairs on the surface of a sphere that make it resistant to other type of antibodies. Well, you just do a little of this, you do a little of that, and this protein trick, and there you go. Now you can fight it. To call that, whatever they call that, the bad guys, and to instill fear is, well, there's always that. They're the witch hunters. They are what Herman Miller was talking about in his book, The Crucible. She's a witch. Burn her. People always fear what they don't understand. And people don't understand a lot when their mommies and daddies didn't bring them up right. The general fear of foreigners, of people not like your kind, is a very big indication that you have a closed-minded person who was not raised sufficiently open-minded by their parents, open to ideas, ready and willing to try new things, new foods, new places, new books, reading for pleasure, reading things that are not from your own culture in particular for pleasure. Everyone should do Gilgamesh And if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And all kinds of books that are just out of your comfort zone, that let you walk a lifetime in somebody else's shoes. It broadens your mind. And you might not remember it, but it touches you and it chemically alters you. And the ways in which it chemically alters you are generally for the better. There's exceptions. Chairman Mao's Little Red Book and the Great Reform that ended up killing more people than Hitler and Stalin combined, that nobody talks about. And books are sometimes dangerously viral. Mein Kampf comes to mind. You know, there's usually a tyrant and a bad guy behind it that is closed-minded and bitter, right? So I gotta always watch it with the sour grapes, because projection, people complain about what they fear most about in themselves. People know best what they fear to face in their own deep shadow self, in the Carl Jung sense. Everybody knows they have that shadow, that dark side, and everybody knows that they're keeping something under control inside of themselves. Surprise! And those who become familiar with it, those who talk to their shadows, can live at peace with themselves, find where they want to be on the spectrum between shadow self and ideal self, idealized self, self that you want to be. On this side, you have the self you want to be. On this side, you have the shadow self that is greatly animal-driven too, I might say. Lower animal. Lower in the head, lower on the spine, lower animal. It's more okay to eat lower animals as a protein source. You can feel less bad about things whose existence isn't so much up here in sentient space, right? We don't eat monkeys that much. There's people who do. It's terrible. It's a crime. Eating cows isn't much better. So I got to get over that one myself. I like my steaks. But eating fish is less morally bad. Not that good and bad. It's good and bad. Moral, good and evil. Moral judgments. Moral, mammal, moral. Morals come from being mammalian and are young being born helpless. Morals come from mammals. Mammals should probably not eat mammals. That'd probably be a pretty good rule. If you can empathize with things like you whose young are also born helpless, maybe you shouldn't be eating them. I mean, I do, so I'm a hypocrite there, but yeah, I'll work on it. But things that don't have that kind of emotion, they have other emotions, mind you. I had a whole long discussion with my wife about thoughts versus feelings. So first of all, thoughts versus feelings. They're both labels, and labels are stupid, and language is an imperfect tool. So keep that in mind in all discussion. The next thing is that thought often refers to what's coming out of the neocortex, the uniquely human and highly self-referential meta type of thinking area of our brain. The part they lobotomize. You don't like someone's thoughts? Drill a hole in their head right there. It's horrible, horrible. It's also where lithium, affects and dulls. Chemical lobotomies. But that's thought, reasoning. So highly vaulted in like the Greek world, Reason is overrated because reason is the icing on top of an already functional animal, an already functional social, highly adaptable, highly generalized mammal, right? And I'm not talking about the bonobos and the orangutans and the chimps and the gorillas, because they're so close to us, you might as well call them us. The only difference is quite how meta they are, how transgenerationally they can preserve their information with high resolution data so that you can build like cities and radios and stuff. But I'm talking about going down the mammal pyramid to things like meerkats, ferrets, weasels, you know, elongated moles, large elongated moles. First you're crawling underground like a mole or a vole, mostly hairless, hair first starting to come onto your body. Eyesight not so important. Smell, very important. Whiskers for feeling. Touch is very important. They pop their head out of the ground. Sunlight hits them. Suddenly, it's highly advantageous to have good eyesight to look around from them popping your head above the surface. And pretty soon you have rodents and, you know, rodent type things. And not long after rodents, they get elongated and you have ferrets and weasels. And those things are starting to have cognitive skills. Not as highly developed as primates, but they're a good step along. And if you want to look at something between them and primates, you can look at lemurs. The lemurs of Madagascar might as well be primates. All the variations of those animals that have become all the niches, all the higher form niches of life. Fossas. I've been thinking about the fossas because of the version of Ubuntu I had to back off from, 20.04. Focal fossa. I think those are Madagascar predator niche lemurs. Everything is some variation of a lemur in Madagascar. And you've got the classical ringtail ones, and you've got little tiny ones, and then you got great big ones, and they fill different niches because they were cut off from the mainland of Africa, and they were on a parallel evolutionary track. So whereas you have things like, you know, large cats in Africa, you have fossas in Madagascar. So things will change their shape and form to fill in every niche based on the vibe of the animal that is epigenetically altering itself to have higher access to available resources. Before the fossas split from lemurs, if I have it right, I hope I have this right, I hope this is a good video. But before the things that evolved into fossas broke off from lemurs, they were much more similar. But there was a creature that was neither lemur nor fossa that said, hey, you know what? If I hunted and got a richer source of protein, I would have better access to resources than the competition. In fact, the competition becomes my food. So, win-win. The opponent doesn't win. They just win twice. They get their meal and they knock out a competitor. What did you think I meant by win-win? Yeah, I stole that line from Match Game, the latest in the Expeditionary Force sci-fi book. The Giraffe, the Ethics and Compliance Department. Yeah. Creatures that did not evolve through the mammalian path have different ethics and morals, you can be assured. They'll still have their own version of it. They'll have their own version of right and wrong, but it's going to be antithetical. It's going to be incompatible. It's going to be scary compared to our version of good and evil and right and wrong. Mammals have a very particular way about them that other branches do not. So, I'm doing a run back and forth to my new place. Not everything can go into public storage on that side. Things that would immediately come back out and have to be set up over there, especially when they're heavy and burdensome and they have parts that need to be kept together, are best just transferred straight out. And so that's what this morning's trip is about. I hope to be there and back before my daily meetings kick in, and then I'll be working a little bit later to make up for it. Monday, I pack. Tuesday, I pack. Wednesday, I move stuff out. Thursday, day off from work, I really move stuff out and maybe do a little bit of cleaning. And I'm also out of there. And then Friday, I am New York City based again. Oh, this drive, this wonderful drive that just passes like that, where you hardly have to think, and it's very spiritual in nature, that was made such a big deal about. And then I picked up the kid for Pride Day. I did the pickup, and I picked them up in a Catskills place that's still held up there, and that was a 2.5-hour drive from New York City where the kid lives. So I'm not doing that regularly. That kid is getting dropped off like it's supposed to be. I don't know how they can make an issue of this quick and easy 1.5-hour drive when that drive, not only is it an hour longer, but it is so complicated and difficult. It is different to just do I-80 and 280 in and out of the city, easy peasy, a little stretch of I-95, no big deal. But that route is this and that and this and that, and you got to stay alert, and you got to. It's a lot of aggressive New York drivers. It is very different vibe. Oh my God! Wow. And then this is made an issue of. So hypocritical. But we talk about the bright spots. I won't have this drive in my life after a few more times back and forth. These long drives, which used to be on my dog walks. If you tuned into me before on these types of things, feeding this need to just ramble, I would do on my dog walks. Occasionally I would do on my subway commute, but that was a little bit odd, right? I couldn't do that on the subway because that disturbed people. There's laws against that. But I could do it walking on the street. So I would choose my route, so I might have a little 20-minute stretch, and I'd give a little bit of interesting scenery of New York City. People liked that from that phase of my life. So there was the dog walk talk, and then there was the commute, the New York City commute talk, Manhattan walk talk. And now there is these drives. 1.5 hour provides quite a bit of forum for and these will be winding down now soon. What shall I do next? Well, I took a nice big 3-bedroom apartment. Give each of us our own room. Parking is easy, but I won't have to use my car very much. I'm gonna have some time. Maybe I'll set up a actual YouTube studio. Maybe I'll actually focus on production quality. Maybe I'll actually get a microphone and be true to my new identity. I have a mic. Well, I have a mic. It's built into the friggin' phone, and it's built into the friggin' laptop. And these mics are actually made to pick up voice well enough to, to be usable. They're actually quite high quality. Now, they're not as high quality as a professional mic you can get, but I got a professional mic not long ago, and when hooked to my laptop, it was terrible compared to the built-in mic from the laptop. The Microsoft built-in mic on their Surface laptop outperformed the external USB compressor mic or whatever it was. That was highly rated and has a pop filter and all that fanciness that bloggers use, but it didn't sound as good. I could probably do something better here in the car, especially with the background ambient noise, the rain and stuff. So granted, there's that. But I'll have the time to think about it. I'll have the time to plan. Maybe I'll do, some video studio type work, some audio studio type work, with sound dampening walls so that you don't get echo, better mic, maybe a better camera. Maybe I'll go that whole Canon route that so many people go to get that really sharp, crisp 4K look, be in the HD community. I've always thought that was overkill. I've always thought that what I bring to this is the ability to just capture things spontaneously and to not be an overproduced YouTube bullshitter. People who write scripts because they don't know the material well enough. They can't just talk spontaneously about something. But honestly, it's to tighten it up. It's to make a better video, and I understand that. I don't deny that. I just don't do that. Maybe I'll start doing that. Maybe I'll write scripts. I'll do some practice runs. I'll edit my video, create visuals. There's so much I could do. Magic. You look for the bright spots. And there are a lot of bright spots. There's a lot of bright spots coming up. And I'm going to focus on those bright spots. Not merely bright spots, love-worthy things. Things worth jumping out of bed for in the morning. Things that make every morning feel like Christmas morning, even though I'm a Jew and I know, but that expression is the expression. That's what most people will understand as having gifts waiting for you for when you wake up. That's what every morning should feel like, the unwrapping of gifts. Oh, and that brings it back to those daemons that, I'm going to have running under Linux containers. Linux LXD containers are going to be running daemons, and those daemons are going to be doing things 24/7 for you. It's going to be so interesting to have something running on a schedule. That's such a big test. And that is my key critical thing now to move forward in work. I kind of stalled out in my work stuff because we hired, an automation hotshot, and he's in fact aligned to my preferences in technology. He is a Python person, although he'll do full stack web development. But, his preference is his tool preference is the same sort of tool preferences as mine. That's great. However, data pipelining is a shift in thinking, even though it aligns to the Unix way and all the stuff I love, piping data and stuff. It's a particular style of wrangling your APIs. You have to wrangle your APIs just so, and by doing so, you can drop them into a scheduler, you see. So it's very much my world. My world is all about schedulers. Daemons are nothing but schedulers. Sometimes they're not scheduled, sometimes they're running continuously 24/7, but just as often you're going to want them to wake up and do something once in a while because they don't need to run 24/7. Why would you have something in memory, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when it just has to be in memory for like 30 seconds every hour. So I like scheduling things, and I like scheduling things in a way where I can watch them run through a console. So I funnel the scheduling through something called GNU Screen. I write a command that runs a command from GNU Screen. Just like as you saw me using the LXC API, the LXD API, and the way to control LXD is through a program called LXC. It's very confusing. I hate that. But that being the case, you do LXC space EXEC space container name space minus space, I hate that, and then the command that you're sending to that container. So there's always some sort of convoluted syntax of sending a command to an executor that is not the thing you're running it from. I have command line capability. My command line capability gives me the ability to run things from other things that have command line capability, such as a Linux container, such as a GNU terminal session, a GNU Screen terminal session. What's the advantage of just, of running something through a GNU Screen terminal session versus just running that thing on the machine you're on? Because it's still on the container. I am on a container. On this container, I can run a command. That command can just be run directly from the bash.exe, right? Bin bash. Bin bash is usually the thing running it. Bin bash runs .sh files, okay? This is generic stuff. This is generic tech literacy. This is literacy. /bin/bash runs .sh files, people. Internalize. There are things other than bash to run script files, but bash is the most popular, and it abides by the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of the script writing and running ability by learning how to do it on the bash shell, the bash script runner. So you write a script. That script could be run straight from bash. Technically, from bash runs Python, Python runs your script. So instead of bash running Python, Python running your script, I chain it out even longer. Bash runs screen, screen runs bash, bash runs Python, Python runs script. And even that is just generic tech, because screen is included with Linux. It's a built-in part of the standard command set. When you talk about the GNU command set, it includes screen. It does not include tmux. It includes screen. And the screen API is perfectly adequate for the types of things I need to get done. What types of things am I talking about? Well, when you run a script, it's nice to watch it run, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to watch it run? Well, if you don't chain it up the way I described, and it's running on a scheduled basis, when you log in to that machine to check on your script, you have nowhere to go to watch it run. It is not running anywhere that is visible to you. There is no console that you can log into. If you tell your script to run from screen, from bash from screen, instead of just from bash, now you've got a terminal you can log into, and it follows all the same Linux-like standard API commands as everything else. If you'll recall, when there are multiple files loaded into Vim, the ls command will list them. ls shows me all the files that are loaded into my various buffers in Vim. Guess what screen uses to show you all the various terminal sessions you can connect to? that you can attach to and unattach from. Screen space what? Let me hear it, folks. Screen space LS. LS is used in the operating system for listing files on a hard drive. LS is used in Vim for listing files loaded into buffers, like different files loaded into Vim at the same time that you can switch between, like multiple files loaded into Excel or Word at the same time, same thing. And LS will also list screens, and you don't have to go into Screen to do this, from a standard terminal. You load your terminal, just like the terminal you get when you WSL space minus install. Now you have Linux. From there, you can just type screen space LS, and it'll tell you what terminal sessions you have running under Screen. There won't be any on a fresh install of Linux, of course. Linux itself doesn't do that by default. They have systems running, system services running, but the service command, service space minus show minus all, it's not ideal, but at least it's standardizing under systemd. It used to be so hard. Control CMD. There used to be all these strange commands to use the old Linux service API. It was not easy. It was weird. But it was there, and people loved it. And so maybe just Gentoo or Gentoo might be the last holdout that's still using init.d. Everyone else, including Arch, has switched over now to systemd. And it was contentious. It was, so many of these things are contentious. When APIs change, Linux and Unix people scream bloody murder. Let me repeat that. That's an important point for all you people deciding what technology to take up. When an API changes on a well-established Unix or Linux tool, the communities surrounding them scream bloody murder. The reason for making that API change, like the move from the init system to systemd, must be so compelling that an equal level of groundswell support is rallied in favor of the change. And even then, it's contentious. I thought until recently that Arch Linux, one of the non-graphical user interface, because there's going to be versions, there can be distros of Linux that just don't use graphical user interfaces. They don't have a desktop because people who use that distro, that's the reason that distro exists. They think graphical desktops are stupid, like I do. So those types of Linuxes have held out a long time against systemd because systemd is an unnecessary API change. It's stupid, but not really. It's the right thing for the right reasons, and Arch Linux was won over. So someone set me straight when I started talking about it. They're like, no, Arch has accepted systemd. Arch is on systemd now. And I looked into it, and of course they were right. And that's good. When old school holdouts like Arch say, okay, systemd is the right way to do it, well, now maybe systemd is the right way to do it. And albeit fairly new to the show, new to the game, new to the Linux world, it is nonetheless the new standard, the new convention. I talk about things that get embraced by the Linux Foundation and are part of the official definition of what Linux is, which trickle out to everyone and everything because it's included in all the distros, all the mainstream distros of Linux. I thought LXD was such a thing. It is not yet. It will be. It's going to go that way like KVM did. And the way systemd did. Systemd has now trickled out to every meaningful mainstream version of Linux. Gentoo people still compile from source. They tweak things out for their hardware. Those little servers, those tiny little servers I was showing you at the storage facility, that little cube and the Fit PC, those things tend to run Gen 2. I'll say it a different way each time. GIF, 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 GIF. Those things tend to run Gen 2 because it's compiled for that hardware. You get the best performance out of it. They're fastest, they're most stable. You know, they have the drivers that are included specifically for them on their distros of Gen 2. It's not an easy world to be in. I don't like it that much. That's why Ubuntu has become so popular. It's driver support. No matter what you try to install Ubuntu on, it's likely going to work. Even ARM-based hardware these days. So, you know, popular Linux distros is often less about the sexy graphic desktop, which like the Mint crowd, right? Mint, the Mint distro of Linux, loves their screen transitions and stuff. But it's more about hardware support. Are the drivers available, and will they be automatically installed correctly during the operating system install? That's what matters. That's what counts. Because if not, you're just going to have problems that plague you for the rest of the time using that hardware with that operating system. Driver support matters. It's what keeps Microsoft so dominant, because if you control the hardware, you control the software and the drivers, right? So Microsoft had to get into the hardware business, and they had to take the initiative on, you know, defining what good hardware was, so that people copy Microsoft, so that that good hardware that's made by the Dells and the Asuses and everything of the world, and the Acers, are all extremely biased towards needing and requiring Windows software. So they keep the OEM deals, so they're not strong-armed by Microsoft into higher price levels by having versions of their hardware with operating systems other than Microsoft. Microsoft uses predatory, original equipment manufacturer, OEM deals. So companies that make the hardware have to decide what software to put on it. If they have models that have, now it might not be this way anymore, but it certainly had been for many, many decades. Any vendor, any other equipment manufacturer who put out models that didn't have Windows on it got worse pricing for their models that did have Windows on it. That happened to Dell, I believe. Dell liked to put out Linux laptops. They went after that business, and Microsoft's like, ding! And these are the reasons Microsoft is still so dominant in our lives of consumer equipment. It's the Android still to Apple's iOS, because iOS might be better, but Android is cheaper. Android phones are cheaper, and they have lots of broad-based, interesting hardware support, features and stuff that Apple don't have. To this day, Apple still doesn't have styluses on a phone. I want to pull out my Note 8. My Note 8 is still almost always on me because it has a stylus. I won't do it because I'm driving, but my Note 8 is on me. There it is. I found it in my pocket. How Apple has not gotten to one of these right here, is beyond reasoning. The Think Differently company won't give you a stylus on an artist's notebook? That's bad. Bad news. I will eventually be off of Apple, just like I'll eventually be off of Microsoft. Neither of these companies is doing you really that big of a favor, except for delivering a quality product at a good price. Well, in the case of Microsoft, a quality product at a good price. In the case of Apple, a quality product at a pretty crappy price. Highly overpriced. So, yeah. In the future, when I can, Microsoft and Apple are both tossed in the can. not exactly a rhyme, is it? Getting close. Not the worst drive in the world, ladies and gentlemen. This has been kind of like food for the soul. It's certainly better than the dog walks. Another thing I was coerced into. These are our decisions in life. You focus on the good points. You focus on the love-worthy bits. Poor Cecil. No one wants to hear you complain. People want to hear you be a juggernaut of spirit. Indomitable spirit. That's what we are as human beings. That is how we overcome the universe's tendency towards chaos. That is how we overcome the laws of conservation of internal momentum. We spin ourselves. We add energy to our internal momentum because we're alive. We override the law of internal momentum, and we override the law of conservation of energy. That's what life does, ladies and gentlemen. That's what life do. That's what we do. And a drive like this is really focusing on the positive. Setting up the kids' bed. One of the big regrets I had from this weekend at, they were like, "Where's my bed?" I'm like, "We're sleeping on foofs. I told you it was going to be camping. I said several times that we're going to be roughing it. And so, I do today what I couldn't do on, I guess it was Saturday when I picked them up. Because when I picked them up, I had to have everything in the car that I was bringing there for the camping trip, for the overnight. And honestly, we got settled in by like 11 p.m. and we had to go right to sleep because we wanted to wake up in time to get out to Pride. So I'm like, don't sweat all this, how it could be during this one night. This is just, a place to sleep for, 6-8 hours before we get up and hit the day. And here I am the next morning, bright and early, dropping off the bed, dropping off a kitchen table, dropping off my work desk. What else do I have in here? The critical things so that it's going to feel more like home on this side than it feels on that side. And all the stuff that's left on that side, I'll probably just gather up in a few loads and carry it off to the dump. I gotta look up the hours. But after a while, packing is going to cease to be packing as diminishing returns kicks in. And so when diminishing returns kicks in on packing, you're down to hard decision stuff. So anything that's half good, you just sweep it into a box and you throw the box in storage, or it's clearly junk and you throw it out. You can't let diminishing returns kill you on the last leg of packing before a move. It's all easy at first because big things and stuff that's in your life every day, and then it gets progressively harder because the decisions get harder, the stuff gets smaller and is more mixed together like the spaghetti of your life. You see me looking around a lot because my visibility is a wee bit cut down on that side. There's stuff in my car, and I got caught behind a Roselle sanitation truck here. You see me passing by. That was not pleasant to be behind. unstoppable spirit of the human animal. Cars are unique extensions of our bodies as tools. The ability to master the car as a tool extension of your body is a superpower. Can you imagine someone with a car and access to fuel in a time before cars and access to maintenance? I mean, it would have to be a Jeep. The era of Mad Max. There's going to be a lot of Jeep Wranglers in Armageddon, I'll tell you that. I've got lifetime Jeep insurance in this thing and almost don't have to use it. I'm 10 years in, almost 90,000 miles. Not a thing wrong with it. Not a mechanical thing wrong with it. Jeeps are a special kind of special. You try and avoid excessive love for hardware. But occasionally, there's varieties of tools, flavors of tools. There's vibes that are very difficult to leave the benefit on the table, because they are better benefits than similar classes of tools. The benefits are better. Jeeps are one of those things, hands down. Found my way to it through kind of like chance. My mom, when she went crazy, bought herself a Jeep Wrangler, a red Wrangler, and she drove off into the sunset in a red Wrangler. And then when, one of the times when the time when she reappeared and had cancer and had lung cancer, and I was going out there to say final goodbyes, I went to I forget, it might have been Enterprise that handles Chryslers, and they said, do you want to upgrade to a Wrangler? And I'm like, I want to make this trip as pleasant as I can, so yeah, sure, give me a Wrangler. So just by chance, I got a red Wrangler on that trip, and it was this weird symmetry of life, and it stuck in my head. And then when the time came to get off of Zipcar, because I was a Zipcar customer for many years in Manhattan, of those 15 years in Manhattan, when Zipcar came onto the scene, I'm like, yeah, I'm there, because not having a car is so emasculating. That superpower being gone, you feel it. And so I had a Zipcar for a while, and then I had the kid, 2010, and by 2014 or so, I was like, I guess it was 2014, because this is a 2013 model, and I got it 1 year old to get that little bit of savings, even though it was a new car. So by 2014, the kid was like pushing 4 years old, and the Zipcar got a little bit tired. I just need a car to take in and out whenever I want without that scheduling. And, I said to my wife, you got any preference of cars? And she was like, yeah, I like that Wrangler we drove when we visited your mother. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I liked that too. And I'm going to get a red one, because I'm going to take ownership of this love-worthy kind of matter, this love-worthy piece of matter, despite the fact that I became aware of it through my mom's schizophrenia and resistance to help, and ditching me in the middle of Los Alamos, New Mexico, at this auto dealership, this slimeball auto dealership that clearly saw they were dealing with a nut, but all they cared about was the money. So they took the check, they gave her a Jeep, and my mom ditched me right there. I couldn't stop it. You can't, in the American system, right? If someone is not an immediate threat to themselves or others, which means attacking a cop, doesn't mean anything else, a threat to themselves or other. If they're actively, harming themselves, then they'll step in. But being a threat to other does not mean hearsay. It means attacking a cop. That's how they'll believe it. So if a nut knows enough, they retain enough intelligence to know if they don't do anything in front of a cop, they're free in the United States. for the most part, especially a family member can't check someone in. The system is very suspicious of family members checking each other into nut houses, right? For good reason. I was caught by a catch-22. So when you have a genuine, very serious case, help is hard to get. So my mom ditched me and I went back to my life. I was like, that's all I can put into it. I was about 2 weeks into this like white knighting, fetching her out of San Felipe, Mexico, the Baja Peninsula, the Florida of Mexico, the other peninsula on the west coast side. They have like another little peninsula out there just like Florida, but that belongs to Mexico and not the United States. There's a lot of Americans there, but there's also a lot of bandits there. There's a highway on the east side and there's a highway on the west side. Oh, you got to be careful if you take that west side highway. El Banditos will stop you and rob you. I did not encounter any, but I took the risk of the west coast side in my big white, it wasn't even a Ford Tempo, but or a Ford Taurus, but it was the higher end model. It might have been a Lincoln. It might have been a white Lincoln Continental, because I felt, or Mark V maybe, I felt the same need as when I got that Wrangler, that if I was going to be doing this bullshit stuff, I might as well be driving a vehicle that makes me feel good about myself. The great unstoppable me needs to feel like the great unstoppable me, so I will always readily pay a little bit more for a rental car that suits my vibe, or that lets me try on a vibe for size. So there was that white Lincoln, the white knighting of the white Lincoln. And then there was the red Wrangler, which actually ended up being my vibe. I love it. It's the Iron Man armor. This is what I feel. This is the shell. This is my turtle shell. And then there was the red Mustang convertible, which I rented twice in my Disneyland and VidCon trips to California with a kid. Red Mustang convertible, trying the vibe on for size. It's a nice feeling. It's it has strange overlapping feelings with a red Wrangler, a red Mustang convertible, but it's not the same. I'd rather be the Hulk than the Flash. If you have a choice between being the Hulk and the Flash, choose the Hulk every time. Hulk smash. And if you're going to be the Hulk, let David Banner, let Bruce Banner into your head. Oh, that truck really got squeezed between two other trucks because of one on the side and the shoulder. Stay alert, stay alive. Following distance, full 8 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. I'm 5, 1,000, and I could use a couple seconds more. Of course, I count slow, so my 5, 1,000 is anyone else's 10 seconds following distance. But life is good. Life is good. If life were not good, life would not exist. It has its moments. It always does. If that temporary suffering of the poor moments makes you feel like it's all not worth it, your mommy and daddy did a poor job. And as much as I put down my folks, my mom who went crazy and my dad who thrust a check cashing shop on me where I had to shoot a guy to defend myself, my mom and dad who got wrapped up in the running on empty hollow man trappings of the 60s and 70s, my folks who never navigated their way to a better place, and my dad who died young because he wanted to, and my mom who went crazy and disappeared and died young because she wanted to. They both made their decisions. I don't think either one of them looked as good as I do at 51 either. I remember my dad at 50. He was building a deck for my bar mitzvah. He had me at 40. He refinished the basement for my sister's bat mitzvah. And then he did the deck for my bar mitzvah. And it's another thing for my sister to be angry about. I just got a basement and he got a deck, an outside deck for a party. So anything I got that was better than my sister by any interpretation was a reason for stabbing me with guilt. Stab after stab of guilt. So I really didn't want anything in life. I was happier having nothing than having and being under attack for it. That sucked. So I learned magic. I learned magic tricks. You know what magic tricks are? I drifted away from magic, even though that's all that anyone was interested in what I did for. My cousins. I remember I had cousins. I still have the cousins. Jonathan and Scott. I was the magic cousin to them because of a few magic tricks I did. And that's what they knew me for. And that's easy to know a person for that because people can relate to it. You know why people relate to it? Because you're getting one over on them. You're tricking them. You're pulling the wool over their eyes, and you're giving them a moment of surprise. Surprise and delight and disbelief. The world may not actually be the way that you think the world is. Think about that. Giving someone the gift of the realization that the world may not be the way you think the world is. That's huge. And again, that theme repeated itself in my YouTube life, my YouTube presence. All that anyone cares about me, no matter how much I talk about Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, and the great integrated life, and the unstoppable, indomitable spirit, nobody cares. Well, the masses don't care. There's a handful of people. Anyone who's still listening at this point, thank you. We are spiritually connected, even if there's just 30 of you out there. And that might be, how big of a circle of friends do people need? YouTube doesn't charge you anything to do this. I could just keep streaming and uploading, and it's nothing. And if it only gets 10 playbacks, you know, what circle of friends do you really need in life? If I reach 10 people, it's pretty good. I had a great long talk. It's a one-sided conversation. I get to do all the talking. How often does someone get that in life? Yeah, I'll be going over the Goethals Bridge. I know my exit. I might even try to do this by memory and go all the way there, but maybe not all the way there. It ain't no one's business. Who knows the way things are really going to shape up? There's so many unknowns in life. You keep doors open. You keep possibilities possible. You don't burn your bridges. Or when you burn your bridges, you choose the bridges you burn carefully. Some bridges are best burnt. Some bridges are best burnt and erased from the map. You know those after time. You don't make those kinds of decisions as snap decisions. And sometimes those bridges that are best burnt and erased from the map, you can't. Because of extenuating circumstances in life. And even there, you go for the love-worthy bits. And it's not just, again, this is where we get back to, it's not just going for the love-worthy bits. That underplays the true spirit of what I'm saying here. It's better than when life gives you lemon, you make lemonade. It is that life is always poo all the time. It's never not. Gold comes from poo in the best and the worst of times. The good, love-worthy things are always emerging from something that is generally suffering, and, you know, yeah, it's despair. So many things in life are that. The Buddhists, you know, talk about it. Life is suffering. We're all born itchy. You feel an itch? Everyone itches. Babies can't always scratch their itches. They don't have the coordination. You know what happens? They adapt to a new normal. Those itches fade into the background and become a new normal. You don't know they're there. They're not itching at you anymore. You don't feel that little spark traveling down and around your skin. You don't have to chase it and try to extinguish something that isn't there. Most people can do that. Most people don't even think about doing that. That's an automatic function of life. Epigenetics. You think yourself into a new normal. You express capabilities. And they're not always gills and tails. They're not always physical attributes that are in your ancestral toolbox of tricks. Sometimes it's the mind over matter ability to suppress itchiness to the point where the itching doesn't exist. Maybe you can't sprout gills and breathe underwater, but maybe you can think you're itching away. Itchy, itchy, itchy. Itchy, itchy. Itchy guy. Are you an itchy guy? Icky guy. Icky guy. Icky guy? Itchy guy. Icky guy. Oh, if you're an icky guy, you're sure gonna itch. Wow. Is that as powerful as lion and cheetah and wolf? Maybe. Icky guy. When what you're good at aligns with what you love to do, with what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. Wow, I got to bring it back to that before I wrap up, because I got to wrap up. I'm going to be getting off my exit real soon. So, yeah, thanks for joining me. See you soon. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to chase your itchy guy, icky guy, icky guy, icky guy.